Pardon my quassy, pack with my soddy. No, pass him my massy, quarter my potty. Pass him my daddy, quarter my passy, pass him my hottie. Oh, I know, it's pass him my slutty. No, it's pass him my quaddy. Of course, that's what I meant to say.
Passamaquoddy. Sounds like a nice place.
So it's early November 1977, and Pete's Dragon is set to hit theaters. But there's a problem. Okay, there are a few problems, but let's start with this. The massively popular space opera, Star Wars, has been in theaters since May and continues to dominate the box office. Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind is set to be released next month, and this is where we start to see a trend.
This means something.
By the late 1970s, the shift towards science fiction movies was in full swing. Advancements in special effects meant those stories could be told in a more realistic manner than ever before, and people flocked to the theaters to see them. I don't know if this is a case of Disney misreading the market or just doubling down on being Disney, but their retro backlot musical, sandwiched between two sci-fi blockbusters, failed to find much of an audience. It was still Disney's most profitable film of that year, topping their other live-action films, Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo and Freaky Friday. Surprisingly, it was even more successful than Disney's animated film from that year, The Rescuers, which wasn't without its own issues. Overall, opinions on Pete's Dragon were fairly well divided, even among Disney enthusiasts. Many found it boring and slow, while others pointed at the fun songs and impressive animation and effects. But in the coming years, Disney would make some pretty radical course corrections with their films, especially the live-action branch. We started to see a lot more films rated PG, rather than the G rating Disney was known for. Films like The Black Hole, The Watcher in the Woods, and Dragon Slayer, which they co-produced with Paramount Pictures, would become the norm for Disney. And I'm not trying to read too far between the lines here, but if there is an anti-Pete's Dragon movie, it's Dragon Slayer. We wouldn't see another Disney musical for 11 years, not until Oliver and Company debuted in 1988. That's not to say Pete's Dragon was the only reason for that tonal shift, but it was clear that audiences were looking for more mature themes, even in their family movies. Needless to say, the next decade of Disney films was quite the adventure. But let's take a look back at this often misunderstood Disney classic. The good,
Hi.
the bad,
Let go of me, let go of me, and mend your wicked ways.
and the ugly.
Downright dangerous getting all wet like this.
Done had our bath in May.
This is Pete's Dragon.
Pete's Dragon?
What's Pete's Dragon?
It's a musical.
Comedy.
Fantasy. From Walt Disney
Productions.
Starring Helen Reddy,
Jim Dale. Mickey Rooney. Red Buttons.
Shelley Winters,
Sean Marshall.
And Elliot.
the Invisible Dragon.
Well, some people can't see.
Pete's Dragon.
A Christmas present from the people.
Taught you how to laugh.
Rated G.
Rated G.
Pete's Dragon.
I wouldn't first see Pete's Dragon until sometime in the 1980s, at home on our VCR. In fact, Pete's Dragon was the first ever Disney film released on VHS. It was part of a lineup that included such titles as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Escape to Witch Mountain, and The Love Bug. Each tape featured a somewhat prohibitive price tag of $60, which is over $200 in today's money. So my family, like many others, rented our videos. What was interesting was that video rental stores actually received a different version of the VHS than the home video market. They were packaged in a blue clamshell, not the white clamshell that most of us associate with Disney films of that era. And the differences didn't stop there. At least in the case of Pete's Dragon, the rental version featured the US theatrical release of the film, with a runtime of 104 minutes. Whereas the video you could purchase and take home featured the international version of the film, with a whopping 24 additional minutes of movie. This international version is the one we know today, as every release moving forward, right up to the Blu-ray, would include that 128-minute runtime. I'll be honest, I thought the movie was just okay as a kid. The Elliot hijinks were fun, but even as a 10-year-old, I thought the idea of a cartoon dragon being treated like a real dragon seemed pretty far-fetched. This movie should have just been a fully animated feature. It would have been so much better. Take a look at some of the art from the various Disneyland records and tell me this movie wouldn't have been fantastic had it been done in this sort of a style. I think this was a huge missed opportunity for Disney. We could be talking about Pete's Dragon these days like we do The Little Mermaid or The Jungle Book. Instead, we got this drab film that, outside of scenes with Elliot, just feels dull to look at. The history of Pete's Dragon actually dates all the way back to 1957, when Walt Disney purchased the rights to the unpublished short story, Pete's Dragon and the USA. Originally planned as a two-part television series for the Disneyland TV show, Disney had his eye on Kevin Corcoran for the role of Pete. Say what you will about Sean Marshall, the actor who wound up playing Pete in the film, but I think Corcoran would have been a perfect fit for this role.
Well, we could dig some big pits.
In the end, Disney decided to shelve the entire project, unsure of how to proceed. It would be dusted off again in 1968, only to languish in development limbo until it was rediscovered a third time in 1975. Walt was famously quoted as saying, "Around here, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things." But after Walt's passing, the studio seemed to completely lose their creative compass. Rather than relying on each other and this creative team they had built, they sat around asking, what would Walt do? He already told you, he would keep moving forward. This is a problem that continues to plague Disney to this day. Just look at the Star Wars sequels or all these live-action remakes. Keep moving forward has turned into keep making money. And that's a huge disappointment.
Can't you hear that jingle jangle sound? Oh yeah. It's money, money, money by the pound.
Now there are some reasons to be grateful for the movie that we did get. There were originally no songs in the film, and no dragon either, as the premise of the short story was for the reader to decide for themselves if the dragon was real or not. After some debate, Disney decided to have one scene at the very end, showing that the dragon was indeed real all along. But the animation team was quick to point out that the audience would feel cheated if they went to see a film called Pete's Dragon, only to see the creature briefly at the end of the movie.
Nope.
Designed by Disney legend Ken Anderson, with a bit of influence from an unused character from the Jungle Book named Rocky the Rhino. Elliot also has the incredible animation skills of Don Bluth written all over him. And while you would see young animators such as Glenn Keane, Ron Clements, and Don Hahn assist in the film's creation, most of the heavy lifting was handled by three men: Bluth, John Pomeroy, and Gary Goldman. At one point in production, all three men were working 100-hour work weeks. When they went to submit for their overtime, Disney struck a bargain where they would receive 1 hour of paid time off for each hour of overtime worked once the film was completed. When it was all said and done, all three men were owed 6 full weeks of paid time off and would use that time to essentially start their own studio. They purchased their own equipment and converted a private house in Los Angeles into a mini movie studio, producing their first animated film, a 30-minute short titled Banjo the Woodpile Cat. Don Bluth Productions would go on to produce such films as The Secret of NIMH, An American Tale, and The Land Before Time, although my personal favorite would be the 1983 video game, Dragon's Lair. I thought this game was the coolest thing as a kid, and I remember pumping quarter after quarter into that machine, and still getting absolutely nowhere. Bluth would leave Disney in 1979, taking 20% of their animation team with him. This move alone would push the release of Disney's next animated film, The Fox and the Hound, back 6 months, with the long-term impact reportedly setting the studio back another 5 or 6 years in training. All said, it would be 10 years before Disney would finally find itself back on top again. It was an unfortunate end to a creative partnership that really should have brought the best out of both parties, but failed to live up to those expectations. Now, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I had always thought the songs from Pete's Dragon had been done by the Sherman Brothers, which is incorrect. While they would continue to do occasional freelance work for Disney in the 1970s, their exclusive rights contract had ended back in 1968. For Pete's Dragon, Disney reached out to songwriters Al Kasha and Joel Hirshhorn, asking them to create a theme song for the movie. While the duo had previously won multiple Academy Awards, those songs were for disaster epics like The Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno, making them kind of a strange choice for a Disney film. The song they would write for Pete's Dragon was a direct nod to those previous Oscar wins, with the fire from The Towering Inferno and the water from The Poseidon Adventure coming together to form Candle on the Water. Disney liked the song so much that they decided to turn the film into a full-blown musical, hiring Kasha and Hirshhorn to write the songs in the musical score. And thank goodness, because this movie without the songs would be almost unwatchable. They were once again nominated for Best Original Song, as well as Best Original Music, but would win neither. Helen Reddy as Nora was also an interesting choice, as she was already under exclusive contract with Capitol Records. This is why the original soundtrack was released by Capitol and not Disney, which is a bit of a shock. The eventual CD release would be produced by Walt Disney Records, but was forced to omit Reddy's pop version of Candle on the Water, meaning there are 2 different versions of the soundtrack out there. Of course, Disney still managed to produce their usual Storyteller and read-along albums for the film's release. The Storyteller album includes multiple songs and clips of dialogue from the film, as well as narration by Bob Holt.
Elliot, you spoiled everything. Darn you, Elliot. I told you to behave.
As Pete and the now visible Elliot crouched in an alleyway, who should come walking by but the keeper of the Passamaquoddy Lighthouse? His name was Lampy, and he was a happy-go-lucky fellow.
Oh, hello there, little boy.
Hi.
Hey, your friend's turned green. If I didn't know any better, I'd say he was a dragon. A dragon!
Elliot, didn't I tell you?
Dragon!
A dragon.
Overall, I'm torn when it comes to Pete's Dragon. Is it one of my favorite Disney movies? No, it is not. It's just not a film that makes it into the rotation very often. When I do watch it, I'm always sort of taken aback by some of the film's off-putting and bizarre choices.
You grab on to Pete. Well, I'll hold on to her.
And the fact that Disney made 2 films in the same year that featured child slavery? What were they thinking? But similar to Song of the South, which continued to live on through the Splash Mountain attraction, Pete's Dragon would find a second life in the Main Street Electrical Parade. The Elliot float debuted in 1977, replacing either a Maleficent dragon or Chinese dragon float. There's not a lot of photographic evidence of either. It was only meant to be a 1-year promotion, coinciding with the release of the film, but the float was so popular that it became a mainstay and the de facto face of that parade. Continuing to run on and off through 2022, I was often curious if any kids from those later years had any idea what the float was from. You can find Pete's Dragon on Disney+, so apparently Disney isn't as ashamed of this film as they are of some of their others. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts. Is Pete's Dragon one of your favorites, or a movie you skip? It's hard to believe that just 2 months ago, I was celebrating my 100th subscriber. That number just hit 2,000 the other day, which is amazing. It tells me that I'm doing something right. A big thank you to everyone who has supported the channel thus far, and if you're new, I hope you'll consider subscribing. So until next time, my name is Jay. Thanks for watching.